This is the before pictures of the piece that we're working on, and as typical, it looks nice when you look at it, but there was quite a bit of damage to this piece with the drawers, and also there were a lot of scratches and deep gouges on the outside of it, so we decided to paint it. And here he's having to put in some epoxy to do some repairs on the drawer runners. You have to clean it first with acetone because there's oil in the wood, so the epoxy won't stick unless you use acetone first. But he has raised that ledge up there where it was just gouged out from years of use. And it makes it a lot stronger for down the road, so that'll last probably another 100 years. And it looks nice. But this is, these little drawer stops here were kind of bent out of place, so we had to straighten them up, which is, again, pretty common. And the drawers, when you push them in, they tended to sort of dip towards the front or tip down a little bit. And so he had to put in some little pieces of wood that actually this first one was just to keep it from pushing back too far. And just use little pieces of wood and glued them on so that it fixes it, so that the drawers look nice when they're shut. He's just putting it right on the bottom in front of the drawer there with a clamp so it dries good, so that way it will not push in too far. So many of the old dressers, that's what they start doing, is they start getting so many drawer issues that's really why most people get rid of them, because they just want something where the drawers open and shut good. And a lot of nails were just kind of nailed back in that were just a little loose or wiggled out from years of use. And this is where he's fixing the problem where the drawer was kind of dipping down in the front. You could actually kind of raise it. You had to sort of raise it up with the handles to make it look right, but it wouldn't, of course, stay there when you let go. So he glued on some little pieces of wood in the back that keep it from being able to dip towards the front. And most of these repairs are pretty typical of older dressers. So this one kind of had a little bit of everything on it, but it's not uncommon for us to have to do this kind of thing on most of them that we redo. But we do make sure that we have all the drawers sliding in and out good and seated properly. So okay, he does really glue on hard wood so that it lasts a long time, but he's also using the sander to just feather that front edge there so that it's not, doesn't look like just a piece of wood that's been glued on. So it actually becomes like part of the drawer. When these wood pieces are glued on, you also really need to clamp them to get a really tight fit so they're going to stay in place and last a long time. So that's really important. Okay, you notice when he puts this drawer back in, you'll kind of see how flush the drawer sits vertically in the front. It's not tipping down or up on the top or bottom. It's flush with the dresser, which is what you want. So he has I think all of them did this actually, so We thought at first they were in the wrong space, but it wasn't that. It was worn away. But it's all like new now. See, it looks nice. Okay, I usually in the beginning, once he's done doing all the drawer repair, I vacuum inside and out really good before I clean it inside and out with Crud Cutter. And that's really important because there's just always so much dust on old pieces inside. And it just really helps to get rid of like any musty odors and everything. So, and anywhere where you're painting, it's going to leave a good surface for the painting. And once I do all the cleaning, I always, let it dry good first before I start any painting. And this Crud Cutter is really good for getting all the dirt off and just dulling the wood surface so the paint sticks really good. Okay, I am priming this piece with the Zenzer Ben white primer, and anytime if I'm going to a lighter color or even a medium range color, I always usually try to use the white. Sometimes I'm out of it, so I will use my clear, but I usually like to use the white primer. And in the beginning, my brush was not really, the one I had pulled to do this with wasn't applying it really correctly, so I had to go and get a little bit softer brush. I like to save sometimes my old good brushes for doing shellac on pieces, because you want a good brush that's going to get a good coat on there, smooth coat. And a lot of pieces like this one, I'm probably going to end up doing 2 coats of primer, because a lot of times on these older pieces, depending on what they're made out of, they usually are known for bleeding a lot, which is why a lot of people go with more darker colors on them, because you don't have that problem as much. But I paint a lot with white, so it's just easier to go ahead and do a second coat of the primer than get it all painted and think you're done, and the next morning you get up and look at it and you can see bleeding places here and there. So the only way you can fix that, of course, is to put more primer on, more shellac, and then repaint that whole side or drawer front or wherever it's bleeding. So that's not really much fun, especially if you've done a blend. Sometimes doing a blend, it's a little bit harder matching up a blend the next day or after the fact than it is right when you're doing it. So it just saves a lot of time in the long run. And I certainly don't want a customer to get a piece of mine and love it and then have it start bleeding on them. So you really want to make sure you've got it sealed good. And there have actually been some pieces that I had a mahogany piece one time that I actually had to prime it 3 times. And I think it could have even used probably a 4th coat. It just would not stop bleeding. But this shellac goes on good, and you can see on the first coat, the first coat really is hard to get a really good solid coverage on it, just because of the nature of the shellac. And so that's why it's going to take probably 2 coats on this, I can tell. And I know what some people do is rather than do this, like I'm doing, just doing the 2 full coats initially, they will actually just paint their piece the first coat, let it dry overnight, and anywhere where it bleeds, they will just use a spray shellac on it in that area. And I actually tried that one time on a piece because I thought this would be a lot quicker. But it didn't really work because the next day when I put the second coat on, there were new places that bled that had not bled the first day. So it's really better just to do it this way and get it over with. And this piece was really pretty. And I looked up the information on this piece, and it's definitely a French piece. And the name that I came up with or showed on the back today, it looks like it's the same name as a property management company in Paris, France. So I don't know if there's a connection with this furniture company or not, but maybe there is. But it's definitely very French looking. And some people will actually use a roller to do the primer, which if you have a lot of flat areas, you can certainly use a roller for this. I decided to do some clay embellishments on the piece, and I'm using an Iron Orchid, the keyholes silicone mold to do keyholes, and I'm using the Prima silicone mold called Forest Flora for the flowers, and I think it'll just be really pretty on it. I was debating whether to use decoupage on the center of this, but I just thought it's too pretty of a piece for that. I really wanted to have something a little bit more substantial. And I think these flowers will be really pretty. And when I bought this clay, it comes in white or this terracotta color. So I accidentally picked up the terracotta color, which, by the way, if you use this on clay pots and do designs on them, you'd have to, of course, seal them with a clear sealer, but it really looks just like it's part of the clay pot. But it really doesn't matter because I'm going to be painting this anyway, so it doesn't matter. But and this terracotta clay, for some reason, it seemed to be a little, I think it had a little bit too much moisture in it. It was a brand new pack that I just bought, but it seemed like it was a little more delicate than the white usually is. Like it was a little thinner, but it still will dry extremely hard. I mean, they will dry just like wood. And what you can do on these designs is I do sometimes is you can kind of dry fit these, if you will. If you're not sure kind of how you want them to go, before you put glue on them, because once you put the glue on them and put them down, they're pretty much stuck. I mean, you can get them off. I've been able sometimes to retrieve them off if you do it right away using like a scraping tool or a putty knife, but sometimes, of course, it can mess it up a little bit. But I never worry about if a piece breaks off or it comes apart, because you can always use the glue and put it together, and nobody's going to ever know that happened. So they're pretty versatile to work with, and I always put these molds on wet, even if it's on a flat surface. I just think it works better that way. And I always let these dry overnight, and sometimes 2 days if it's a thick mold. These just need overnight to dry, but some of my molds are thicker and they'll take maybe 2 days to dry, depending on the humidity. But I always let them dry good before I paint them, because once you paint them, it's sealing them. So I want them to really last and be hard. I'm trying to adding some little molds on the mirror too, just for it to tie in with the dresser. And this piece is just so pretty, I think, with this. It's like a small little mirror on the top. It's kind of a petite, I would say petite size dresser. I mean, it's not short, but it's just everything is a little bit smaller on it, and it's really very pretty. And I am using a custom color I mixed up that is called Rustic Pink. And I'm using DIY, Debbie's Design Diary paint for this color. And I am using, it's 1 part of Marquee, which is a deep, deep red, and 1 part of Summer Crush, which is like an orange or salmon color, and then 2 parts white. And it is a beautiful pink color, but it also has, I think, a hint of coral. And I think it just depends on the light or the way you look at it, but it's really, really a pretty color. And I just found this online, just somebody, there's different recipes, but this is the one that I kind of mixed up and liked. And the main thing is when you mix custom colors like this, you want to always make sure that you mark down how much you put of one or the other, and you can either measure it or weigh it. But you want to do that for sure, because in case you need more paint, if you run out, you don't want to get stuck and not have the same color, unless what you're doing doesn't matter with that. But I wanted this to be the same color. And I'm also with this doing the kind of white in the center of on the sides or the top or the drawers, just to add a little bit of highlight to it a little bit. I'm just doing what I would call just a rough blend. I'm not trying to blend it seamless. I just want to add a little bit of dimension, more dimension to it. And I'm just using the white and with the pink, while the pink is still wet, just to be able to blend it. And you'll probably notice I'm using the same brush. When I dip my brush in the white, I don't drag it along the sides or anything. I just dip the tip in. And for me, it's just, this just achieves the look. If I was going for more of a white look in the center, I probably would have a separate brush for the white. And I'm doing the same thing here on the mirror, just adding a little bit of white in the center to just highlight it. And I did tape off this mirror, although I still ended up having to do a lot of scraping on it. Okay, here I'm doing my second coat of the blending, and I'm used my mister bottle to dampen the area just so the blending is a little bit easier, because chalk paint can be very kind of rough feeling initially, and without the misting on that first coat or the layer before, it just is a lot more work to blend it or move it around than what it needs to be. So if you mist it lightly, it's going to allow it to spread around a lot easier for you. And I did end up sealing this piece when this all dried good. I did end up sealing it with 2 coats of the General Finishes water-based poly and the matte finish. And then I just do a light scuff sand in between because that for the chalk paint, it really makes it so much smoother. You can see the way I'm doing this blend with the white, it's really just making the look like a lighter pink color in the center, but this is just easier for me than mixing up a separate color and trying to blend the two, because that, unless you get a color that's quite a bit lighter, it doesn't really show up very much. So I think this is just easier for me. And I wanted it to be subtle. And the thing about this blending is it's easy really, because you can just keep playing around with it. If you don't like it, let it dry for a little bit, mist it, and try again. And you'll just get the color you like. But once you do it a while, it's easy to do. Now that it's all dry and sealed with the poly, I am putting on the Min Wax and Natural or Clear Wax, and I'm using my big wax brush to really spread it all around good. I really want a good coating on it, and then I go back with just a soft cloth and just wipe off the excess. Mainly because with the big wax brush, it's easy to get too much wax on, but you want to make sure it's covered good. And here I am putting on some of the Prima's Gold Decor Wax to highlight the details, and I was going to do just the very bottom tip of the front legs, but I ended up just doing the whole leg. And if this stuff, don't be afraid to use it, because it's permanent once it dries and sits overnight. But while you're putting it on, I usually use my finger, but sometimes you can use a detail brush too, whichever works better. But if you get some of it where you don't want it, all you have to do is just use clear wax and just wipe it off. It'll work like an eraser. And you can use Q-tips or a brush. Sometimes I have to use a brush or Q-tips to get into an area easily without wiping it off where you just put it on. So, but my finger usually works the best with putting it on. And it's just a really pretty gold leaf looking color. And it's going to match the new hardware really good. And this Decor Wax or gilding wax is the very last thing I do as far as sealing, because this is permanent. See, I was thinking about doing just the very bottom part of the leg, the front leg, but I decided to do the whole leg. I just thought it looked better. And it was sad that some of this old hardware was missing, but I will be using it on other pieces that I do, so it won't go to waste. But I did buy some new drop pulls, and my husband came up with a really clever way to be able to paint them where you don't have to flip them or worry about the paint running down where you can't see it. This Krylon metallic gold leaf is a nice color, and it looks good with the, and we also seal it with the satin crystal clear in the Krylon. And it just turned out really beautiful. But I thought this was pretty clever, using a clip to clip it to another board. And of course, if you didn't have drop pulls, you could just have it hanging right side up because they wouldn't be flipping over on you. So this makes it real easy for them to dry good and to be able to paint them all in one swoop. This mirror actually, the dresser doesn't have to be used with the mirror. So I do felt on the bottom so it protects the top. And I wanted to add just a little something else, and I happen to have this decoupage tissue that I'm using with Mod Podge, and I use my brayer with wax paper to kind of get out any air bubbles or lines, and I just let that dry, and it always dries really good for me. And then I put 2 more coats on it when I'm done. So this is the piece finished. Looks really pretty, I think. And this is the before again. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm glad that you watched it. If you haven't subscribed, please click on subscribe and hit the like button if you liked it. And thanks for watching. Have a great day.